Hey guys! Today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. On December 15th, 2020, in a small town in Montana, a distressing call came into emergency services. A man, his voice filled with panic, reported that his wife had fallen down the stairs and was unresponsive. Within minutes, first responders arrived, but the scene raised far too many questions. When paramedics entered the home, they found Amanda Hillius unconscious at the bottom of the stairs. Her body was twisted unnaturally, her face covered in deep bruises, and her breathing was faint. Inside the house were her husband, Brad, his father, Scott, who had been living with them for several years, and their son. However, investigators would soon realize this was no accident. Witness statements, medical reports, and Amanda's personal messages would reveal a chilling truth hidden behind the walls of this home. And most importantly, her 11-year-old son had seen more than anyone could have imagined. Amanda Hillius was born on January 29, 1987, in a small Montana town. Her mother, Michelle, was just 16 years old when she learned she was pregnant. The news was a shock. She was still a teenager herself, just beginning to plan her future. But despite her fear and uncertainty, she decided to keep the baby. Amanda's father left before she was even born, refusing to take on any responsibility. Michelle grew up in a strict household where an early pregnancy was seen as a disgrace. Her parents were disappointed in her decision and refused to offer support, making her situation even more difficult. Left to care for her daughter alone, Michelle had no financial or emotional backing from her family. She dropped out of school and took a low-paying job to provide the bare essentials for Amanda. For a while, Michelle and her daughter lived with relatives, but the tension in the house was overwhelming. Eventually, she realized she needed to become independent. With great effort, she managed to rent a small apartment and start rebuilding her life. Despite all the hardships, she did her best to give Amanda warmth and care, trying to fill the void left by her absent father. Amanda grew up in Montana, in a town where everyone knew each other. Life here was simple and predictable, and community ties were strong. From a young age, she was outgoing and friendly, always surrounded by friends with whom she played outside and explored the nearby forests. But unlike many of her peers, Amanda understood that her life was different. Other children had two parents at home. Their mothers weren't working long hours every day, and there was always someone there to support them. Amanda quickly realized how much her mother sacrificed for her, which instilled in her a deep sense of gratitude and respect for hard work. During her school years, Amanda was known for her curiosity and determination. Academics came easily to her, though she had to juggle school with household chores, helping her mother whenever she could. Despite the challenges, Amanda never complained or wished for more than she had. She learned early on to appreciate what was available to her and focused on building a better future. As Amanda grew into her teenage years, her character became even stronger. She remained a dedicated student but increasingly thought about how to shape her own life. Unlike her mother, who had faced many difficulties, Amanda wanted stability. She wasn't drawn to impulsive decisions or unpredictable risks. Her vision of the future was structured and secure. During high school, she took a part-time job after classes to ease some of the financial burden on her mother. This experience taught her the value of hard work and financial independence. Amanda's dreams were always connected to helping people. She aspired to work in the medical field, having witnessed from a young age how difficult life could be for those struggling alone. Between school and work, Amanda had little time for personal relationships. She experienced her first crushes in her teenage years, but avoided serious commitments. She knew she was still young and was determined not to repeat her mother's mistakes. Amanda met Brad Hillius in early 2010 through mutual friends. From their very first conversation, there was an undeniable connection. Brad had a confident, easygoing nature and a great sense of humor. He worked as a firefighter and took pride in his profession, knowing that saving lives gave his work purpose. Amanda, who had grown up self-reliant and accustomed to challenges, saw him as a dependable man capable of building a strong family. Their bond deepened quickly as they shared similar values and outlooks on life. Both wanted stability, respected family traditions, and avoided uncertainty. From the start, Brad proved to be a supportive and reassuring partner. He came across as someone who could be counted on, someone who made the future feel safe. For Amanda, that sense of security was priceless. Their wedding was a modest affair, attended by only close family and friends. Amanda had never been one for extravagance. What mattered most to her was building a family, not hosting a grand celebration. After the wedding, life settled into a steady rhythm. They worked, made improvements to their home, and talked about expanding their family. Before long, Amanda discovered she was expecting their first child. Welcoming their firstborn was a defining moment for both of them. Amanda immediately embraced motherhood, balancing the demands of caring for her baby with her work in healthcare, a challenge that required immense effort. But she managed it all because family always came first for her. Over the years, their family grew. After their firstborn, they welcomed a second, then a third, and finally a fourth. Their home was filled with laughter, endless responsibilities, and the beautiful chaos of family life. Amanda felt she had finally created the life she had always dreamed of, one centered around her loved ones and their future. But despite everything, Amanda began noticing troubling signs in their relationship. At first, she didn't think much of it, but over time, it became clear that Brad was changing. He started spending less time at home, often blaming work. At first, Amanda believed him. After all, his job was demanding. But soon, she realized he was actively avoiding family life. Brad grew increasingly irritable, and his behavior became distant. He used to enjoy helping with their sons and daughters and being involved in family activities, but now he seemed uninterested. Sometimes, he would leave the house without saying where he was going. When Amanda asked, he would give short answers or dismiss her concerns altogether. She could sense that something in their marriage had shifted, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what was wrong. Brad was pulling away, yet he wasn't openly confrontational. This made Amanda uneasy, but she didn't know how to approach him without triggering frustration. At the time, she still believed these were just temporary struggles, maybe stress, exhaustion, or the routine of daily life weighing on him. But soon, her worries would turn into certainty. Small changes would escalate into serious problems that would alter her life forever. By late 2019, Amanda came across undeniable proof that Brad had been unfaithful. She accidentally discovered that he had been in contact with a woman named Riley, whom he had met through work. Up until that moment, Amanda had only suspected that something was off in their relationship, but she had no solid evidence. Now, the truth was clear. There was someone else. Amanda confronted Brad, hoping he would explain himself and that they could work through it. But he refused to admit any wrongdoing and didn't want to discuss the situation. He insisted that nothing was going on between him and Riley and that Amanda's suspicions were baseless. She wasn't convinced, but at the time, she decided not to push further. Months passed, but her anxiety only grew. Brad remained distant, spent even less time at home, and when he was there, he acted cold and indifferent. Amanda decided to gather proof. She started paying closer attention to his behavior, monitored his activity on social media, and eventually noticed that he was leaving suggestive comments under other women's photos. Amanda took screenshots and saved them on her phone before confronting him again. This time she presented the evidence and demanded an honest answer, but once again Brad denied everything, insisting that she was reading too much into it. He brushed it off, saying that flirting online was just harmless fun and meant nothing. Amanda tried to convince herself that the situation wasn't as serious as it seemed. She hoped that Brad would recognize the consequences of his actions and rethink his behavior. However, he continued to act as if nothing was wrong. When Amanda suggested they see a family counselor, Brad immediately dismissed the idea. By early 2020, Amanda realized things had gone too far. One day, she accidentally came across messages between Brad and Riley and discovered that their connection hadn't ended. In fact, he had only become more cautious, carefully hiding his contact with the other woman. After confronting him, Brad stopped sharing a bedroom with Amanda altogether. He moved into another room, claiming it was more comfortable for him. That moment became the breaking point in their marriage. Amanda no longer saw a reason to hold on to the relationship, but the thought of divorce terrified her, especially because of their family. In April 2020, an event occurred that shattered their home for good. That evening, an argument broke out between them, escalating into a serious conflict. Brad became aggressive, his voice growing louder and more intense. Amanda felt threatened and attempted to record the conversation on her phone. When Brad noticed, he grabbed the device from her hand and smashed it against the floor. Then he forcefully grabbed her wrists, demanding that she stop provoking him. Amanda managed to break free and grabbed another phone to call her father for help. He could hear shouting and struggling on the other end of the line, and without hesitation, he called the police. By the time officers arrived, Amanda was shaken, but hesitant to reveal the full extent of what had happened. She admitted they had a fight but avoided going into details. Despite her reluctance, the police documented the incident, and a judge later issued a temporary restraining order against Brad. His father, Scott, was also included in the order. Scott Hillius, Brad's father, had been living with them for several years. After retiring, he moved into his son's home, taking on some of the responsibilities of helping with his grandchildren. On the surface, it seemed like he was offering support to the young family, but over time, his presence became another source of tension in the household. Scott had a difficult personality. He was hot-tempered, outspoken, and often said harsh things without considering the consequences. His parenting approach felt outdated and strict, and his views on family dynamics were deeply traditional. He believed that a wife should always submit to her husband, and he made it clear on multiple occasions that he disapproved of Amanda's attempts to assert her independence. When Amanda and Brad started having problems, Scott almost always took his son's side. He didn't see anything wrong with Brad's behavior and believed Amanda was overreacting. Whenever she tried to set boundaries, he would sarcastically remark that women always make a big deal out of nothing. When Amanda decided to leave and move to Oregon with her sons and daughters, Scott became one of the biggest obstacles. He didn't just support Brad, he escalated the situation with direct threats. He told her he had connections who could take care of the problem if she tried to take the family away. At that moment, she realized she wasn't just fighting Brad, she was up against his father as well, a man willing to do whatever it took to maintain control. After the April 2020 incident, the situation inside Amanda and Brad's home only got worse. Despite the temporary restraining order, Brad continued living under the same roof, growing more and more aggressive. The order didn't stop him from applying constant psychological pressure. He ignored Amanda, made belittling remarks, and would explode over the smallest things. His behavior became unpredictable, and Amanda found herself increasingly afraid to be around him. He no longer bothered hiding his hostility, making his frustration clear. If before he had at least pretended to remain calm, now he openly showed his resentment. He would slam doors, throw objects, or raise his voice in front of the family. Amanda knew this was all a way to assert control, but she felt trapped, unsure of how to protect herself and her loved ones. December 15th, 2020 started like any other day. Amanda woke up early, before the house filled with the sounds of the morning routine. Her usual schedule involved quickly getting ready for work, preparing breakfast, and organizing the day for her family. That morning followed the same pattern. Brad stayed in bed, the younger ones were still asleep, and their 11-year-old son was already in the kitchen, making himself something to eat. Before starting her usual tasks, Amanda grabbed her phone and began scrolling through social media. It was her morning ritual, a brief distraction to check updates and news, but within minutes, something familiar and unsettling caught her attention. In her feed, she noticed Brad's comments under photos of other women. Once again, he was leaving flirtatious, provocative messages, completely unconcerned about who might see them. The sight of it triggered a flood of emotions. Not long ago, she had still held on to hope that things would change, that he would stop acting like their family didn't matter to him. But nothing had changed. He was still the same, making no effort to hide his behavior. Amanda felt a wave of frustration rising inside her. She couldn't just ignore it. Amanda walked into the bedroom, where Brad was still lying in bed, and tried to talk to him. The conversation started calmly, but quickly escalated into yet another argument. Brad had no interest in discussing anything. He waved her off, saying it wasn't the time for this, and tried to shut the conversation down. But this time, Amanda wasn't going to back down. She demanded answers, hoping for at least some kind of acknowledgement. Instead of listening, Brad grew frustrated. His tone became sharper, his words more cutting. He snapped that he wasn't doing anything wrong and that her accusations were meaningless. At one point, Brad told her that if she didn't like it, she could just leave. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. After everything she had endured, after all her efforts to hold the family together, this was what he had to say. Her patience finally broke. Emotion overwhelmed her, and the argument spiraled out of control. Brad's reaction was immediate. In that moment, their 11-year-old son, who had been in the kitchen, heard the shouting and stepped into the hallway. By now, he was used to the tension between his parents, but something about this time felt different. He walked toward the doorway and saw his father grab his mother's wrist. Amanda tried to pull away, but Brad wouldn't let go. The boy froze. He didn't know what to do or how to react. A few seconds later, he saw Brad strike Amanda across the face with an open palm, then clench his fist and hit her again. Amanda stumbled, then collapsed onto the floor. The boy stood motionless, unable to process what he had just witnessed. He saw his mother trying to get up, but Brad was already looming over her. For a brief moment, their eyes met, father and son. The boy knew he had to get away. He turned and ran up the stairs. Before disappearing into his room, he heard his father dragging his mother downward, to a place where no one would see what happened next. Sometime later, Amanda lay at the bottom of the staircase. Her body was twisted unnaturally, her hair tangled, strands partially covering her face. Beneath her, a faint trace of blood stained the floor. She was still breathing, but barely. Every movement was a struggle, as if even the act of inhaling caused her pain. It was Scott, Brad's father, who called emergency services. After Brad found Amanda at the bottom of the stairs, he attempted to wake her but was unsuccessful. He then called for Scott, who quickly rushed over to help. Together, they tried to stop the bleeding and check if she was still breathing. Realizing the situation was critical, Scott grabbed the phone and dialed for help. While speaking with the dispatcher, he reported that his daughter-in-law had fallen down the stairs and was unresponsive. Meanwhile, Brad remained beside Amanda, appearing to assist her. When paramedics arrived, they quickly assessed Amanda's condition. Her pulse was weak and her breathing was shallow. Multiple injuries were visible across her face and body, including significant bruising. The emergency team immediately took action, providing respiratory support and checking her vital signs. Determining that she needed immediate hospital care, they carefully lifted Amanda onto a stretcher and rushed her toward the ambulance. As they secured her inside, Brad stood nearby, his face tense. He watched the scene unfold in silence, not saying a word. With sirens blaring, the ambulance sped toward the nearest hospital. Left behind in the house were scattered signs of disorder, an unsettling silence, and a growing sense that something irreversible had taken place. Upon arrival at the hospital, Amanda was in critical condition. Medical staff immediately began life-saving procedures, but her vitals remained unstable. Severe injuries, a weak pulse, and dangerously low oxygen levels indicated her body was shutting down. Doctors quickly performed a full evaluation. A CT scan revealed a traumatic brain injury, extensive bruising, and swelling in her brain. Internal damage to her neck suggested signs of restricted airflow. Oxygen deprivation was evident in her lungs, pointing to prolonged hypoxia. The intensive care team fought to keep her alive. She was placed on a ventilator to assist with breathing, while medications were administered to stabilize her blood pressure and prevent further decline. However, there was no sign of improvement. For the next 3 days, doctors closely monitored her condition, but no progress was made. Her body continued to weaken. The damage to her brain was too severe and the lack of oxygen had caused irreversible consequences. On December 19, 2020, Amanda passed away in the intensive care unit. Her heart stopped, and all attempts to resuscitate her were unsuccessful. Doctors officially pronounced her deceased, citing acute brain hypoxia caused by physical trauma. The news of her passing devastated her loved ones. Her mother was in shock, unable to comprehend that her daughter, who just days ago had been full of life, would never come home again. Her father was at a loss for words, and her family, especially her eldest son, struggled to process what had happened. Following Amanda's passing, law enforcement launched a full-scale investigation. The first person they questioned was Brad, who was the only adult witness to the incident. His version of events remained consistent. He insisted that Amanda had accidentally fallen down the stairs. According to him, he heard a noise, stepped out of the bedroom, and found her unconscious at the bottom of the staircase. He claimed that he immediately rushed to help her, attempted to wake her, then called for his father, Scott, and together they contacted emergency services. Investigators began examining his account, but it wasn't long before they uncovered serious inconsistencies. The first red flag was the nature of Amanda's injuries. The medical examiner's report revealed not only multiple bruises, but also signs of restricted airflow. Brain swelling, damage to the cartilage in her neck, and distinct fractures indicated that she had been forcibly restrained. A simple fall down the stairs could not have caused such injuries. Additionally, upon further examination, it was found that some of Amanda's injuries had occurred before the alleged fall. There were bruises on her face, contusions on her arms, and marks on her skin suggesting excessive pressure. All evidence pointed to the fact that before the fall, Amanda had been physically harmed. The key witness in the case was their 11-year-old son. During his interview, he revealed that on the day of the incident, he had seen his father strike his mother before dragging her downstairs. He recalled hearing her cries and the sounds of a struggle. He also mentioned that Brad had ordered him to go to his room before continuing his altercation with Amanda. His statement strongly supported the theory that Amanda had been subjected to domestic aggression, but authorities needed further corroboration. Investigators interviewed neighbors and relatives, many of whom confirmed the ongoing conflicts within the household. Some had overheard heated arguments, while Amanda's close friends were aware of her fears and anxieties about her home life. With mounting evidence, law enforcement turned its attention to Riley, Brad's acquaintance. She was brought in for questioning, and while she initially appeared cooperative, her demeanor quickly raised suspicions. Though she claimed to have no involvement, it became clear that she was avoiding key questions and withholding information. Riley claimed she had no knowledge of what happened that morning and insisted she had nothing to do with the tragedy. However, investigators soon discovered that the day after Amanda's passing, she had been at Brad's house, and the two had discussed the incident. The investigation continued, but by this point, law enforcement had already pieced together a clear picture of events. Brad's claim that it was an accident didn't align with medical reports or witness statements. He continued to deny any involvement, but the evidence against him was becoming increasingly difficult to refute. Just days after Amanda's passing, an event occurred that further complicated the case. On December 24, 2020, Christmas Eve, Scott Hillius, Brad's father, was found lifeless in the shed behind his home. He had used a firearm on himself, leaving behind several notes. It was Brad who discovered the body. He told police that shortly before the incident, he had spoken with his father. According to him, Scott was overwhelmed, saying he couldn't handle the situation and didn't want to go to prison. Before heading to the shed, he reportedly stated that he couldn't take the pressure anymore. Moments later, Brad heard the gunshot. Authorities arrived quickly and conducted a thorough examination of the scene. 3 handwritten notes were recovered, all addressed to his grandchildren. However, contrary to expectations, none contained any form of confession. Instead, they expressed love for his family and grief over the situation, but they made no mention of any involvement in Amanda's passing. This raised many questions. If Scott had truly been responsible, why hadn't he admitted it in his final words? The letters seemed more like the writings of someone who felt broken rather than a confession to a crime. Brad wasted no time in using his father's passing to shift suspicion away from himself. In conversations with police, he began suggesting that Scott might have been the one responsible for Amanda's injuries. He claimed that his father was emotionally unstable and had shown hostility toward Amanda in the past. According to Brad, it was possible that Scott had attacked her that day and then staged it as an accident. However, There was no actual evidence to support this claim. The only person who could have confirmed it was Scott himself, but now he was gone. Investigators found nothing linking him to the events of that night. On the contrary, all the evidence continued to point directly at Brad. Despite Brad's attempts to shift blame onto his deceased father, law enforcement did not take this theory seriously. Forensic analysis and witness statements reinforced that Brad was the one responsible for Amanda's fate. Scott's actions may have been driven by fear of the consequences, but they did not indicate his involvement in the crime. This development only added further complexity to the case, creating another layer of uncertainty. Was this an admission of guilt or an attempt to protect his son? There were no longer any clear answers. The only undeniable truth was that Amanda was gone, and the investigation's primary goal was to seek justice. Brad's trial began in January 2022. The prosecution presented the evidence collected throughout the investigation. In addition to medical records, prosecutors introduced evidence of ongoing domestic aggression. Audio recordings of arguments, secretly made by Amanda in the weeks leading up to the tragedy, along with text messages to her friends and mother, painted a picture of continuous threats from Brad. Police also provided details of the April 2020 incident, when a temporary restraining order had been issued against him. However, Brad's defense insisted that Amanda's passing was the result of an accidental fall. His attorney argued that the prosecution was relying on emotions rather than facts. The defense pointed to the lack of obvious external signs of restricted airflow and attempted to use Scott's self-inflicted passing as possible evidence that he had been responsible. But the most crucial moment of the trial came with the testimony of Amanda and Brad's 11-year-old son. He told the court that he had witnessed his father striking his mother that day. He confirmed that Brad had hit her and dragged her down the stairs. His statement was a turning point. His account aligned with the medical evidence, further solidifying the prosecution's case. After a 10-day trial, the jury deliberated for 5 hours before reaching a verdict. Brad was found guilty of intentional homicide. The judge sentenced him to 100 years in prison without the possibility of parole. For Amanda's family, this was long-awaited justice, but the pain of losing her remained. Her mother was granted custody of the children and took on the responsibility of raising them. They had to adjust to a new reality, one without either of their parents. Brad attempted to appeal the verdict, claiming the trial had been biased against him. However, the court rejected his appeal, ruling that all evidence had been presented fairly and lawfully. In the end, he remained behind bars while Amanda's family moved forward, trying to rebuild what he had destroyed. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.